Resident Evil, probably the most famous franchise in the world, especially in the genre of survival horror. At this point, Resident Evil is the most successful franchise of Capcom. And it's not surprising, the whole franchise consists of more than 30 games, varying degrees of quality, remakes, movies, animated series, novels and comic books. And it's never too late to find out why people love this universe so much. Make yourself comfortable. This is the first episode of Resident Evil, History of the Series. As I've already mentioned, there are a lot of games dedicated to this series, and all of them have an impact on the plot to some extent. Several names and characters will be mentioned and found in various parts, and almost all media is intertwined into one major plot. The fascinating atmosphere, engaging gameplay, great characters exist together with doubtful decisions, questionable spin-offs, and some boring fillers. But there is no doubt that this franchise is one of the most impactful and remarkable in the world. Since we have some remakes of already existing games, and there are probably going to be more of them, and the whole plot consists and proceeds from different parts randomly and not chronologically, I've been thinking how to present the series in a better way. Is it better to release a direct comparison between the first part from 1996 and GameCube/PC release in one episode or separate episodes? Should I base on the chronology of the events? Should I base on the official releases of the games? So I decided to do something in between. Every game will be discussed separately, but with additional explanations. Alright, let's get into it. Not all people know that the game was supposed to be not a standalone project, but as a continuation or a remake of already existing game. In 1989, the game that was based on the movie called Sweet Home was released in Japan by Capcom. In this game, 5 members entered some mysterious mansion in order to take pictures of some old paintings. They got locked inside, and it turned out that the mansion was haunted and different monsters along with ghosts dwelt there. To get out of the mansion, a player had to play all 5 characters, since all of them had some unique abilities. One of them had a lighter, he can get things on fire. Another one, a photographer, could take pictures of paintings and receive some clues. There was a restoration artist who could clean dirty paintings and remove broken glass. Also, one of the members could open some closed doors. Also, there was a healer. Despite some technical limitations, many players and critics call it a cult hit, and we already can see the elements that were used in the very first Resident Evil. Several years later, it was decided to remake the original game for newer platforms, and already well-known Shinji Mikami was in charge of this remake. But the more Shinji Mikami was working on the remake, the more new ideas and elements were being used through the development. In the end, it changed so much and was so far from the original game, it was decided to call this game Biohazard. Yeah, for those who may not know, all Resident Evil games are called Biohazard in Japan. It's quite a common thing for Japan actually. Siren, Project Zero, Biohazard, and Wanda to Kyozo in Japan, Forbidden Siren, Fatal Frame, Resident Evil, and Shadow of the Colossus everywhere else. And these are only the first games that came to mind. The thing is that when the game was about to be licensed with the name Biohazard, it turned out that this name was already taken by a music band and some less known game. Capcom ran an internal company contest to find a new name. The name Resident Evil was settled upon since the game takes place in a mansion. This is how Resident Evil appeared on PlayStation 1 in 1996. Usually I talk about different versions of the game closer to the end of the video, but this time I think it's reasonable to point out that some things could considerably change from different perspectives. Intro video, difficulty changes, auto-aim, placement of enemies, ink ribbons and other stuff. The plot itself doesn't really change. I just wanted to mention the fact of different versions up front, so if you mentioned that some of the enemies in the video may appear in other places than you may remember, that's why. July 24th, 1998. Horrible murders start to occur in the whereabouts of the fictional Midwestern town of Raccoon City. Reports claim that cannibals were behind it because it seemed like victims were eaten. When the police couldn't find the ones responsible for this, it was decided to send a Special Tactics and Rescue Squad, or service, to investigate the case. In short, STARS. STARS was divided into two teams, Alpha and Bravo. At first, Bravo team was sent to investigate this case, but the contact with them got lost. Alpha team takes charge of the investigation and has to find Bravo team as well. When Alpha team reaches the point of the destination, they notice smoke coming from the ground. It is the helicopter of Bravo team. One of the team members, Joseph Frost, finds a pistol, with a torn hand still holding it. The pack of dogs suddenly attacks Joseph. Alpha team's helicopter pilot, Brad Vickers, panics and takes off alone, leaving other members of the team, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Albert Wesker, and Barry Burton. Luckily for them, they find a place to hide, a huge mansion not far from their place. Unfortunately, they didn't know what exactly was waiting for them inside. At the beginning of the game, you can choose your playable character, either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. Depending on the characters, some cutscenes and game mechanics may change, recognizable features of Sweet Home. Our team can't go outside anymore since the monster's dogs are still waiting outside. While wandering through the mansion, our protagonist will stumble upon more dogs, enemies that look like zombies, and even deadly spiders and plants. Also, the mansion consists of dozens of closed doors, puzzles, and secrets. Throughout the game, the protagonist may encounter several members of Bravo team, including Rebecca Chambers, who will be helping us from time to time, and Enrico Marini, the captain of the STARS Bravo team. He will say something about a traitor and double agent before being killed by an unseen killer. On his last breath, he says something about Umbrella.
Hell. Umbrella.
Trying to chase down the killer, our hero finds an underground laboratory, where he or she will have to fight against former scientists and what they created. All these monsters are the result of horrible experiments with people and animals in attempts to create and control a highly contagious and mutagenic T-virus. The whole building was built by architect George Trevor for Oswald Spencer, who chose the architect because of his previous houses and mansions full of secrets, puzzles, and hidden rooms. And all these experiments and researches were performed under the authority and supervision of biomedical company Umbrella Corporation. And it looks like another evil corporation is trying to conquer the world. But it's not always been like that. For the sake of context and further understanding of the games, I think it would be better to point out some important and major moments of this corporation right now. The foundation for this company was established in 1966, where three founders of the company, Oswald Spencer, Edward Ashford, James Marcus, and his student Braden Bailey, went to the west of Africa to find a certain flower called Stairway to the Sun, which was supposed to grow in a very specific place, the Garden of the Sun. According to the book of Henry Travis, Oswald Spencer possessed, this flower could give superhuman strength and intelligence to a consumer. Although this flower is very toxic, so there are not so many compatible people to it. Stairway to the Sun becomes central to Ndipaya tribe's tradition, who lived near the caves. In fact, they used the flower to choose a new leader of the tribe. The one who survives the consumption of the flower will become the head of the tribe. At last, the scientists found the flower and started their research. Edward Ashford and James Marcus were experts in biology and virology, while Oswald Spencer was mostly providing them with money. Turns out that this flower contains a retrovirus that will be further named Progenita. It is able to change the DNA of its possessor, humans, animals, or even plants. It was decided to transfer the flower to the USA to continue researches. One major problem appeared on their way. It turned out that the flower was able to produce the virus only in the Garden of the Sun. Even the attempts to transfer it somewhere else ended up losing its features. In order to cover attempts to grow the flower and the research of viruses that could potentially change the world we know now, in 1968, Umbrella Corporation was officially created. On the outside, it was a pharmaceutical, chemical, tourism, health foods, and cosmetics corporation. But on the inside, it was a corporation responsible for the development of biochemical and bioorganic weapons. As you've probably guessed, Umbrella possesses some military forces as well to cover up and clean some unexpected results and actions. In fact, STARS was generously funded by Umbrella itself. We'll be learning new details about Umbrella through this story, but I thought that at least this piece of information was necessary for the context. So after going to the laboratory, our protagonist finds the already mentioned double agent and traitor. It is Albert Wesker. In one of the notes, we could find out that STARS members were alert and sent on the mission on purpose to find out how the bioorganic weapon would deal with them and gather data. And Wesker knew about it. Actually, Wesker is a much more complicated character than you may think. He has some backstory in trying to achieve his own goals here, but we'll talk about him later.
The failure of the experiment created a virus, a biological weapon, polluting the entire lab.
Just like every bad guy of that time, he tells us his despicable plan and shows us their great creation, Tyrant, T-002. Tyrant is an attempt to create an obedient bioorganic weapon with a T-virus inside it. You might wonder, if there is a T-002 model exists, then there must be T-001 model as well. And you are right, but I'll tell you about it in another video. Wesker releases Tyrant, but instead of attacking our protagonist, it decides to attack Wesker first.
Go to hell. Jill will join you too. What? Don't come this way! No!
You can't kill me!
After the fight, the main heroes decide to blow the whole thing up. Luckily, earlier they could find a very conveniently placed bomb, in case Umbrella decided to cover the tracks and instantly kill the mess that's been happening here. By the way, if you manage to find 3 MO discs and activate them, you'll be able to release your partner from the cell and escape together. The helicopter pilot Brad, who supposedly escaped at the beginning of the game, comes back and tries to save our heroes. But Tyrant is still alive and wants to stop them. Unfortunately, rocket launchers are his only weakness. The helicopter flies away and the mansion explodes. Depending on who you were playing and who survived during your walkthrough, you'll get the appropriate ending. The canon one is where the mansion explodes, everyone survives, and Tyrant is dead. They don't really differ from each other much. Initially, Resident Evil was supposed to have a first-person view, but after some time and revealing Alone in the Dark game, Mikami decided to adopt the fixed camera approach, saying that this way a player would feel more detached. Also, it was much easier to hide enemies, so they could start attacking players unexpectedly from blind points of the camera. Nevertheless, we know that Resident Evil will not completely forget about this conception and implement it in the series many years later. Although the main plot was not something extraordinary, it gave birth to a very long existing franchise that continues its way even nowadays. Just like already mentioned Alone in the Dark that was released in 1992, players had to get out of the mansion by solving puzzles and dealing with supernatural creatures. And besides quite good graphics at the time, Resident Evil possessed some unique features. One of them is the interconnected chests that can be found in save rooms. Since the number of item slots was limited and players could not just get rid of an unnecessary item, resources management was quite a big deal. These chests were connected with each other. It means that you could get access to all your stuff from any save room and any chest. Capcom also planned to eliminate the interconnected nature of the chests, meaning that items could only be retrieved from the location they were originally stored. This change made it in preview copies of the US version, but was removed from the retail release. You can save your game by going to a typewriter and using ink ribbons to save the game. The thing is that the number of ink ribbons was limited. Another famous feature is combining herbs. Different combinations of herbs could cause various effects. For example, a green herb can only restore health. You can combine 2 herbs to restore more health. A red herb doesn't do much on its own, but improves the effect of the other herb. In combination with a green herb, it triples the effect of healing. And there is a blue herb. During your walkthrough, you'll find some venomous enemies. If they hit you, you'll receive poison status and your health will decrease little by little. There is no HP bar on the screen, by the way. You are able to see it only on your pause/inventory screen. And one more thing, it's not quite a feature, but our heroes cannot move while shooting. They can turn around, but while shooting they stand still. So proper and precise positioning was also a very important part of the game. As I've already mentioned enemies, it's time to describe them. Because of the experiments that were being carried at the mansion, many ordinary animals and people turned into horrible creatures. Ordinary zombies were probably inspired by George Romero's zombies from movies like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and other movies. He was an American filmmaker, writer, and editor, and as you've probably guessed, was famous for his movies about zombie apocalypses. These zombies are people infected by T-virus and may vary through the game. The last zombies have a slight resemblance to the Tyrant, so it's possible that they were test subjects to become one. Infected crows look slightly bigger than ordinary ones, and if one crow doesn't deal a lot of damage, together they can annoy and kill quickly. It's possible to avoid them at all if you don't shoot them or attract their attention. Zombie dog or Cerberus. I hate dogs in games. They're pretty weak but fast, so they annoy you more than pose a serious threat. Snakes also don't pose any threat. The best tactic is to run fast and avoid any encounter. Huge spiders cannot spin webs but can crawl on the ceiling and poison you. The most annoying thing about them is actually the death itself. When they die, they release the swarm of baby spiders. Wasps. They don't really differ much from ordinary wasps, except for their size probably. You encounter them only once and they don't show themselves unless you come close to their hive. Still common but much more dangerous enemy is the hunter. It looks like a humanoid lizard, it is really fast, jumps high and deals a lot of damage. If hunters could only move on the floor, then chimeras, just like spiders, could move on the ceiling as well. They are extremely fast and deal a lot of damage. Happily, players encounter them only closer to the end of the game and not for long. The bosses here are more challenging. The first boss we encounter is a giant snake called Yawn. Not only does it bite you, but it also injects venom in you. If you're bitten, you can only be treated by the serum found in the mansion's drug room.
Chris!
Am I poisoned? Damn it, give me serum.
I'm sure the serum must be there. I'll be right back.
Plant 42, a huge plant that feeds on the blood of its victims. If you manage to mix a chemical called V-Jolt, you'll be able to dry its roots, which will make this boss fight much easier. Black Tiger is a huge spider, but unlike previous big spiders, it is able to spin webs. It bites you and sprays you with venom. Its weakness is fire, and the game conveniently places a flamethrower on this level. Neptune is just a huge shark that can insta-kill you. Although if you ignore it and lower the water level, it won't do much to you. The last but not least is the already mentioned Tyrant, or T-002. Originally, there were 4 test subjects chosen to become Tyrants. They had to endure several surgeries to increase resistance to the virus and strengthen the body. 3 subjects died and only 1 survived. Its one hand is deformed and looks more like a huge hand with claws. It was one of the first successful attempts to create a bioorganic weapon. Only people with specific DNA code could survive T-virus injection and turned into such a creature. The heart on the right side of his chest that was transplanted from a large animal clearly looks like its weak spot. But this Tyrant had several blood circulatory systems thanks to it, so the destruction of one heart would slow him down rather than kill. Its genitalia was surgically removed in order to cease the primary secretion of testosterone, limiting its potential aggression to improve control. Due to his improved physical abilities, it could run up to 60 km or 40 miles per hour, destroy walls, jump high, and possesses higher regenerative capabilities. It is not as intelligent as human and it was hard to control, but it was able to partly understand commands and follow orders. I already mentioned several times that Chris and Jill had some unique features. Also, Jill's walkthrough is considered easier than Chris's, and there is a bunch of reasons for that. Jill has 8 inventory spaces instead of 6. Chris opens closed drawers with small keys instead of the lockpick that Jill has. Considering the fact that every small key takes up 1 slot in Chris's inventory, it can be tricky to carry too many of them.
Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Thanks. Maybe I'll need it.
Jill can even open some doors with the lockpick. Jill can get a bazooka, and Chris can find a flamethrower. Chris starts the game only with a combat knife and a healing spray. Jill, on the other hand, receives a Beretta M92FS on top of it. At the same time, Chris can aim better, die slower, and run slightly faster than Jill. Barry Burton helps Jill most of the time, and you can either accept or decline his help several times through the game, just like Chris can accept or decline Rebecca's help. These choices may influence the ending. Closer to the end, Barry will betray Jill and lead her to Wesker, because Barry's family was kept as hostages, but in the end, he does what's right. I also already mentioned several versions of the game. Some of them have considerable changes, so I think it's reasonable not to stick to every single change, but I'll name the most important ones. First of all, the opening scene has censored, uncensored, colored, and black and white versions. The death of one of the team members was also censored in several versions. In the first iteration of the game that was released in 1996, auto-aim was present in the original Japanese release, but there was no auto-aim in Western releases. Since in the first versions of PlayStation controllers there were no analog sticks, the game could obviously be played only on D-pad. Japanese release was also easier than Western one. It had an adjusted difficulty where enemies had less health and heroes had more health. The number of ink ribbons was increased. PC version that was also released in 1996 had several changes, same as the PlayStation original, with the following differences. If you finished the game within 3 hours, you could unlock new weapons, MAC-10 for Jill and FN Mini-Me for Chris. Also, you could unlock a couple of new skins for Chris and Jill by obtaining the key after you finished the game. There was no auto-aim in the game and door opening animations could be skipped. Director's Cut that was released 1 year later had several significant changes. Full difficulty changes appeared. Original in Japanese store and standard in the US store. This one is the level of difficulty of the original game and despite its name was rather hard. Beginner or training levels. Easy mode with more bullets and enemies are easier to kill. Arrange or advanced mode. This mode mixes up the placement of enemies, puzzle items, ammo and herbs. Also, some camera angles were changed, some rooms were textured, and the handgun could randomly insta-kill a zombie. Beating this mode with the best ending unlocks the Colt Python with unlimited ammo. And if you highlight advanced mode and hold down the right directional pad for about 10 seconds, it should change to green, which doubles the ammo once you start a new game. Auto-aim was present. Every character, including Rebecca, received a new outfit. That year, a release for Sega Saturn happened and it also had some changes. It had another enemy called Tick, but mostly this was a reskin of already mentioned hunters. Chris had to fight Tyrant twice in the lab. This version had a minigame called Battle Game, where a player had to kill enemies within a certain period of time. This game showed some exclusive enemies like Gold Tyrant and Zombie Wesker, and some alternative costumes. In 1998, another version called Resident Evil Director's Cut DualShock version was released. It used the previous Director's Cut as a basis, but also had some additions. As obvious as it is, it supported DualShock controller of PlayStation, and a reworked soundtrack. This game was also released on Nintendo DS in 2006 and was called Resident Evil Deadly Silence. The console had 2 screens and it was used. The whole gameplay was happening on the bottom screen, and the map of the area, the chosen weapon, and remaining bullets were shown on the upper screen. It could also show you your amount of health. If it starts blinking, it means that you need to heal. If it turns purple, it means that you are poisoned. It had 2 modes, Classic Mode and Rebirth Mode. Classic Mode is Classic Resident Evil, and Rebirth Mode had several significant changes. Some new puzzles and game situations were added where features of the console were used. Since the bottom screen was a touch screen, you could use it to push buttons or cut your enemies, for example. If you managed to cut them all without taking damage, you'll receive some ammo. It also used a mic in the console, but only twice through the game. You could turn around 180 degrees, you could fight back and release yourself if zombie grabbed you. Players could skip opening doors animations. After the first walkthrough, you'll open Master of Knifing Game mode, where you'll have to fight against 4 levels of enemies including the giant snake in the end. When you enter a save room, you're able to find blue chests with a puzzle. If you solve it, you'll receive some goods. This version also supported wireless connection and could be played with friends. Even some special maps were added there. It had 2 modes, against each other and cooperative. In the first mode, you had to escape the level faster than your friends, and in the second mode, along with your friends, had to escape the area within a limited time. The main characters could also open some skins. One more addition, Resident Evil for Game Boy Color, and I'm personally glad that they didn't make it. The overall quality didn't look like something promising even at that time. Nevertheless, several years later, a certain person claimed that he possessed a complete version of the game for Game Boy Color and was ready to share it for $2,000. Surprisingly, these were truly working versions of the game. The full ROM for this game was available by one of the game developers. The website Assembler Games attained all the money and the community received the game. Probably the last interesting fact is that there were supposed to be 2 more heroes, Dewey and Galzer. Dewey was supposed to be a tall, dark-skinned character with a good sense of humor, and another one, Galzer, was supposed to be a big, gorilla-like shape heavy weapons specialist. He was supposed to be a war veteran and had to have an ocular implant instead of his lost eye. Well, as you can see today, this game made a huge impact on the whole genre in general, although it was not the very first game in the genre, but it combined a lot of pieces, mechanics, and atmosphere together. Except for English voice cover probably, but all in all this game gave birth to a very continuous franchise and other memorable games as well. It's possible that I probably missed something or didn't tell something intentionally. If you have something to add, you're free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for your patience and attention, ladies and gentlemen. See you in several weeks.